no members of the public. A warm welcome to the scheduled and ordinary meeting of the Infrastructure Committee. I'm your chair, Councillor Beard, joined by Councillor Rowan and Neil Stevens.
You do an introduction.
Line it up. It's a relatively straightforward agenda, but we'll get underway. We'll start off with cover care. E2. Tuea Kilanga, Tuea Kilaro, Tuea Te Roroto, Kuea Kilaro, Tuea Te He Tangata, Karonga Te Paipo, Karonga Te Ao, Huie, Tai Kie. We'll get on to apologies. I have apologies from Her Worship the Mayor, who's absent on other council business, and I know that Councillor Roney, you need to be away by 9:45. Hopefully we should be done and dusted, or pretty close to that by then. Are there any other apologies? There be none. I'll move the apologies be received. Someone to second.
Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Neil Stevens. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Confirmation of the business. We have a submitter for the water supply bylaw. We'll deal with that in public as part of public forum, I guess. Then we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes. There'll be a presentation. I have a chair's report, but there's acknowledgement I need to make to the staff, and then we'll deal with the other matters after that. So with that, are there any interests that need to be declared? None? Okay, thanks very much. I'd like Mr. Gilbertson to come forward, an opportunity to make a submission in relation to the water supply bylaw. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Brian, and fellow councillors for giving the opportunity to speak on this from the Nelson Cycle Trails Trust, which manage the several trails around the country and give advice on forming cycle trails and management of cycle infrastructure. I'll just quickly run through. You've all read the submission, so it's really just beefing up on that a little bit and pointing out some extra things. I struggled a little bit with this bylaw because of its clarity. It seemed to concentrate on a few things and not on its prime function, which was to protect the water. So I decided to go back to square one, really, and have a look at what it's supposed to do, and that's to protect the water in the Mito catchment area. And I needed to look at the main risks. The risks, as far as I saw them, were interference with infrastructure, contamination of the water through E. coli and related microbial bacteria, and sedimentation. So if I was attacking this, I would be looking at those, identify the likelihood of those happening and plan accordingly. What's the current levels of contamination? There was no background to tell me how much that was, so I really can't answer that question. I think council needs to have a look what the current levels are of E. coli and related microbial is. Infrastructure. I didn't find any fences around one of the most crucial infrastructure areas, no signs or anything, so I'll come to that in a minute. E. coli, identify the possible sources and plan accordingly, and ensure there are buffers from land disturbance. Those were the main ones I saw. So the infrastructure protection, South Branch, this is the south, this is where 70 or 80% of Nelson water comes from. There's no signs, no fences. I assume that that is a council sort of way of doing it. Let's not highlight it and people won't interfere with it. Don't know how happy you are with that. How do I get it to go? Next one here. Wild animals. Probably the biggest source of E. coli and microbial in the whole catchment would be from wild animals. I saw a microbial source tracking survey was done in 2008 by Cawthron, not for this area but further down the Maitai. But one of the conclusions from that report was, as you move up the Maitai, human microbial bacteria decreases, and most of it is coming from possums and goats and sheep and other things. Notice sheep was one of the ones, and you have grazing animals, sheep, right up to the edge of the dam. Nothing in this bylaw that talks about that. Forestry and sedimentation would be the other one I would look at. You've got a buffer around the lake here. These forestry areas are classified as medium risk, not high, but just medium risk in the erosion standards throughout New Zealand. And if you probably have sufficient buffers, you may be able to protect the area. There's been enough written about this in the last 2 years that I've written to sort of form a large volume of information that you can seek. So your management plan for the forestry should really cover that, not a bylaw. Little Rover here. Little Rover was snapped walking up to the caves in the Maitai. Little Rover can't read signs which says no dogs, obviously. And each time I go up there, I see dogs. But you've already got a dog bylaw, so you don't really need it in this one. Perhaps some enforcement, if it's actually needed. I'm not sure that dogs are polluting it. There's no information as to whether dogs are actually polluting the water or not. Human. Currently, you have 15,000 visits a year by humans. We know those numbers because they're from reliable sources. And what are the buffers? At the moment, this is to the Maitai Caves here. You're walking along the side of the river. You're actually walking in the river in places, the cycle trail, and they move close to the water in places, some close up to 20 metres. I'm not sure whether there's human pollution or not, because I don't actually know at this stage. I couldn't find any information of microbial tracking for humans alone. There's no data on that. Notice the buffer that's proposed in Zone 2 of this document talks about a 100-metre buffer. I'll come to that later. Facilities is probably the best way to deal with humans, and I'll come to that later. So the question arises, is the bylaw the right document for dealing with this? The bylaw deals in absolutes. It deals in absolute rules. Planning documents are effects-based. Therefore, you can decide on rules, you can assess what happens, and if necessary, you can change it to cope with it. I'll just cover some of the problem absolutes in this bylaw. Existing tracks. Here's a map on your site, on top of the South maps, of the tracks in the area. Are these the existing tracks? Or are these the existing tracks? I've added in some red lines there. These are other tracks that are in the area. They're there. I don't actually know what existing tracks you're talking about. When is the existing track an existing track? Is it now when you pass this bylaw? Which means if it is, when you pass this bylaw, there is to be no new tracks in this whole area. That's the only thing I conclusion. So therefore, that's the absolute. There's difficulties with absolutes when you say no new tracks. So the bylaw is absolute. It has no criteria. Notice there's no assessment ability in a bylaw for anything but existing tracks. Hence, no new tracks allowed. The reserves plan has provision for new tracks by assessing effects to protect water. It's actually in the reserves plan. That's what it says. So that to me is the logical document to deal with it. Council at the moment is developing an out and about strategy. In that out and about strategy, I'm sure you'll be calling for public submissions about what people want. But if this bylaw is passed, you've already ruled out the fact of new tracks. Can't happen. Another problem, mountain biking, non-engine assisted. Well, sorry, an electric mountain bike is an engine assisted bike. because it's no definition here of anything different. This law will ban electric mountain bikes in the Mito catchment. Let's be very clear about that. So I don't know what you intend to do. The council has invested quite a considerable number of dollars in actually building up the whole infrastructure around mountain biking in that area. And in fact, are planning to do so more in the golf course thing. So there's no difference of effect on water quality from an electric mountain bike or a non-electric mountain bike. Other absolutes, there are problems. Walking off existing tracks, you can only do it by permit. Is the council really going to prosecute somebody who's botanising off a track? I doubt it. So what the hell is it in there? Surely walking anywhere has no effect unless perhaps you're right in a stream. Well, your tracks already go through streams. Yeah. Four-wheel drives. Current permits are issued for driving over the Maitai, over the Mongatapu. I don't see anything in here that describes how the criteria for that is decided. There's no assessment ability in this bylaw. Now, this is the part I really struggled with, the zoning. These zonings are taken out of an MFE background paper. The zone 1 is to protect infrastructure. Council are proposing a 35-metre buffer, despite that background paper suggesting between 5 and 30 metres. Not sure where the 35 metres came from. Perhaps it's just a slip of the pen or something. But you're not even fencing around one of your key infrastructures. So what's this about? Zone 2 is even more problematic. Zone 2 has a 100-metre buffer from water, but there's nothing in this document to say what you're going to do with that 100-metre buffer. At the moment, you have 15,000 visits a year in that buffer. Is council actually going to do anything with that buffer? Are you going to take those 15,000 people and say you can't come here anymore? I don't think so. So therefore, why have you even adopted these default zones? They haven't even been thought about. Zone 3 says similar things. Let's move on a little bit. Example of a planning approach, toilets. On the cycle trails that we create, we try to have what we call the 1 to 1.5 hour travel. The dam could be a toilet used, but it's not cycle friendly for bikers. That's easy changes once you put that new bridge in. It'll be easy to take cyclists past the dam toilets. Copmine Saddle is a toilet there, but the caves is about a 3.5 hour return trip. So somewhere or other, you should be catering for people if there is a problem from human contamination. I'm not sure whether there is. There's no data on that. This is a flawed document in my point of view. Applying zones that have no meaning because there's 15,000 a year exemptions for them. There's no explanation of the exemptions and the rationale behind them in those zones. The absolute means there is no clear path for assessing of effects. Should not the recreational planning documents be the documents you use to make sure that there is no contamination? The Act says if it can be done elsewhere, it should be done elsewhere. And that is the point of view that I say. So to summarise, I say scrap the bylaw in its present form and only including things that cannot be dealt with in other planning documents. You have an out and about strategy, you have a management plan. Do not apply zonings from other documents that actually have no meaning because you're not actually going to use them, I don't think. Probably the thing to summarise really is to go back to those point of views that we had, which was the forestry. It can be dealt with in the planning documents for your forestry planning. The wild animals, you're already dealing with wild animals by having wild animal control. Make sure those wild animal controls are not just linked to protecting the native flora and fauna, but actually protecting the water. In other words, what are the numbers you need to bring the wild animals down to have protection? The forestry, I already spoken about. Dogs, you already have a bylaw. The human impact, let's actually first of all find out whether there is microbial pollution from humans, and if it is, then what are you going to do about it in terms of numbers? And that probably should be done through a planning document, not through a bylaw. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Gilbertson. Any questions in relation to the submission from Mr. Gilbertson? I've got Councillor Sanson, Councillor Laurie, then Councillor Edgar.
Thank you through the chair. Kia ora, Bill. Thanks for that. Really interesting. Lots to think on. I'm just wondering whether you could send that presentation through to councillors at ncc.gov.nz. It would just be really helpful for us to be able to.
That there.
Yeah.
You
Should have already received.
You've already got that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sent out by the
Is it
government's
the
advisors
submission
the
that's
other
in
day.
the thing? Yep. So, okay. That's it for me for the moment.
Okay, then Councillor Laurie.
Thanks, Bill. I feel like I've just experienced blitzkrieg. It was like a bombing run. And I'm just really impressed with your submission. And I'm just wondering, how much time did you put into it? And I think it's really valuable, but you've obviously invested a fair bit of yourself in this.
Yes, well, I suppose half a day or at least just actually writing the submission and getting the facts together, but also searching to see if I can find out the information to go with it. And that's where I struggled. And also reading the background paper from MFE was interesting, and seeing how that paper applied to this situation, I struggled with, because I don't think it does. I think you need to do your own work in terms of what is necessary to protect, not just dump somebody else's thing in. And that took a while to actually think that through. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. Mr. Chairman, I personally think that Bill's raised a whole lot of issues that I would very much like to hear back from staff on. And one that I'm just going to stick up a flagpole right from the start is on a number of recent mountain bike rides up to the dam, I have been struck by the amount of sheep poo that I have to try and get out of my tyres. And Bill makes, I think, an excellent point that this is where our water is, and we have livestock grazing very, very close to it. So that's one thing I'd like to get some response on. But I think there's a whole lot of points that we need to hear from staff on. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Bill. Some really great information there. So one of the things when we put, when the bylaw was changed, there was some of the key changes were to align with the Nelson Tasman Land Development Manual and also with the TDC water supply bylaw, for, as frequently said, ease, consistency.
Yep.
So is theirs, have we sort of picked up, flaws of theirs, or have we gone off on a tangent, or what do you think has happened?
In fairness, Judina, I think there's two aspects here. The first is it was an alteration to an existing bylaw that I don't think was very well written in the first place, because of the points that I've raised here. It had some things in it that were wrong that should have been scrapped. The second one is Tasman takes its water from a bore. It's those regulations from MFE that were put forward, the suggestions in the background paper, do concentrate on a lot of, it came from a bore situation, that's how it was generated. And I think in the Mito Reserve, you have a relatively protected situation because you don't have stock, you don't have land clearance, you do have forestry, but if you get rid of the stock and a few other things and control your wild animals, I think you probably solve the problem if there is one. I'm not even sure that there is one, and that's the first thing to establish. So it's different than Tasman, and I think aligning them is in some ways a little bit difficult. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you so much.
Questions? Oh, Councillor Fulton.
Thank you, through the chair. In terms of the mountain biking section, the non-engine assisted, it looks like that's intentionally placed there, and yet I would have thought electric mountain biking allowed far more members of our community to access.
So I can't quite hear. Okay.
In terms of electric mountain biking, is it your view that it allows far more of our community to access mountain biking as a recreational choice?
I think the question there is actually related to recreational opportunity. And while I could answer your question, I don't think it's actually relevant to this bylaw, The question with bylaw is actually about the impact on water.
Okay,
And I cannot see the difference between an electric mountain bike and a non-electric mountain bike in terms of its impact. If we're talking about numbers that are actually biking the trail, then that may change because more people are available, but that's something to be addressed in terms of recreation impact on the
out and
environment.
about strategy.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you, thanks.
Thanks very much, Bill. Really appreciate the effort and the time you put into and the thought you've given your submission.
Thank you, Brian,
Thanks very much.
and other councillors.
Brian, just to follow up, I can't see that presentation. It doesn't look like it's been sent through to us yet. Is it going to be?
It'll be attached to the minutes.
Awesome, great, thanks very
But
much.
I
Just
think
wanting
it
to
turned out
clarify
there was
that.
one sent out about last Friday from the GAs.
Okay. I've just looked back through all the
okay.
emails from the government's advisors. I can't find it, so it doesn't seem like we've received it yet.
Right.
Thanks.
Well, we'll make sure it is circulated. Yeah, Councillor Noonan?
Look, I've just got a question. So we've just heard that in public forum, but how's it going to be recorded? Because that actually is a submission.
Oh, I said that we're doing the submissions in place of the public forum.
Okay, so
Because Mr. Gilbert's going to come in and get in rather than sort of sit through all the.
get in early. Okay.
But
So-
now's a good time. We'll deal with the hearing of the water supply bylaw. If there are any questions that councillors have of.
So just a process question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So when we usually do hearings separate from meetings, I'm thinking of if I was looking for something later, down the track, can we have this recorded in such a way that it's easy to locate it, the hearing or the submission that's just been heard? That'll go into while it's tied up with a meeting, which is throwing my head a little bit.
Hearing a submission.
Yes, the hearing of a submission within with this model,
Yeah.
we usually have hearings separate from meetings. No, we don't.
No, it's part of the
Okay.
agenda.
So how are we going to? I just want it easily locatable.
Well, all
It's
the
a
submissions,
request.
yeah.
So just however. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Inga?
Yes, so both Mr. Gilbertson and Mr. Jones in their submissions raised the, I guess, use of the bylaw as a tool. And when setting a bylaw, and I know we already had a bylaw in place, that of course has to be the first assessment. Is the bylaw the most effective tool for what we're trying to achieve? That's, always number one. So what I'd like to get back from staff, I'm sure it was in the February report, but I think just reflecting on the comments made by Mr. Gilbertson, have we gone beyond the scope of what would best be covered in the bylaw, and are those other planning tools that we've got, are they the best places for some of those ancillary matters?
Good point. I'm sure there are there any other questions just quickly while we go around the table? Right. The opportunity will be that if you've got any other questions, I think just note them down, and could you email any questions to the General Manager? Mr. Laverdis, Councillor Laurie.
Thanks. Just for clarity, so when will we get the answers to those questions?
They'll form part of the deliberations. We'll be dealing with the deliberations report at our next Infrastructure Committee meeting, I think is the.
So through the chair, that was scheduled for July, but there have been some movement of meetings, and it'll probably be going to an August meeting. I'm still trying to sort that out with the GAs, but it
Great,
was meant to be July. It's now going to be around about August, I think, but it won't be July.
Today's just hearing the submissions and the opportunity for any questions.
With this bylaw, is there any time issue in terms of when it needs to be done by?
And through the chair, the fact that we've gone out to consultation, we've met all the statutory requirements. The next step is to hear, deliberate, and then make a decision, which is, as I said, we're on track to do all of that.
Okay, but that's not time bound.
No.
Okay, thanks.
No, not to the best of my knowledge.
Yep, great, thanks.
From my understanding. And the main thing is that we will do the deliberations, but it's still full council that actually has to deal with the bylaw. We don't have that delegation. Councillor Sanson?
Thanks. One question I'd like to know is, were kind of stakeholders notified about this? I note there's a submission from the Cycle Trails Trust and one from Nelson Marlborough Health, but there doesn't seem to be anything from, say, Forest and Bird or the Mountain Bike Club. So just, it would be helpful to know that.
Yeah, I think you've already submitted some questions, so with those, I think have been passed on to Mr. Lavertis.
Through the chair, yes, I have an email from Councillor Sanson, and we will address all those questions in the deliberations report. Yes, indeed.
Great. Thanks. So just dealing with the hearing submissions, no other questions that need to be asked here and now? Anything on the review of the wastewater bylaw? I might just
Sorry, and I just assume the points raised about the permitting of processes for each of the 3 zones raised in the Nelson Marlborough Health submission will also come through in that deliberations report.
Yes. We'll go through each of the submissions and address any questions that the committee has. Indeed, yes.
Lovely, thank you.
Great, thanks. So that's item 7 and 8 will have been dealt with. I'll go just back to the interest public forum confirmation order of the minutes. So back to previous minutes of the meeting of the 8th of April. As per the agenda, anything on page 1? I'll have a look at them. 2, 3, 4, or 5. So any alterations or amendments? None. Someone to move that they are true and correct record. Thanks, Councillor Courtney. Someone to second. Councillor Edgar. Those, I'll put it. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks very much. Next is the chairperson's report. I do not have a chairperson's report, other than the only thing I want to mention is to acknowledge our staff in terms of the 3M Innovating Streets Award. We've set a very, very clear governance direction that we want our streets and our city to be people friendly, streets to be safe, and vulnerable users to be protected. And I have to say, this work can be hard and it can be challenging, but it does reinforce that we need to involve our communities and bring them along with us and implementing sort of the sorts of things we want. So the safety awards, innovation safety awards, are basically based on the safe system, a forgiving road system that takes into account that people make mistakes, but when you make mistakes, people shouldn't be hurt. And we've had the funding from NZTA Wakatahi for the Innovative Streets for Nelson South. And at the recent Transportation Group Awards, Nelson City Council, led by Mrs. Parfitt, Marg Parfitt, took out the winner of the Innovating Street Award for 2021 in Nelson. And it's I think there's a real commitment to Marg and the staff, Rebecca and Matt and Paul and Sue McCauley, who have been Nelson's part of this, but I also need to acknowledge the work that Stantec has done. James Newton and who was the other one? Claire Scott, sort of representing Kauai Street. I think it was a public forum about a year or so back saying we are sick of the rat running and the speed of vehicles in our street. Could you please do something? And that was the opportunity. That's been work in progress. So I really like to acknowledge our staff. We've given them the direction we want to go in, and they have delivered an outstanding project with stunning results. And the best thing has been recognised by both the industry and their peers, which is the best kind of acknowledgement there is. That you put up a project, and it's our people have delivered an outstanding project. So, on behalf of myself and the committee, I'd like to say thank you very, very much. Well done. So we have certificates to give out. So So if you'd like to come forward, Rebecca, Matt, Paul, Sue's not here, is she? Yes. So you'd like to come over?
Like a little citizenship ceremony.
Well done, Matt. Rebecca, well done. And Paul. And of course, the major award and the leader of this is Mark Parfitt.
I think you should hold that, because can I just say, without your leadership and your support, this project could have paused or stopped even. But you backed us, and we kept going, and we're going to keep going, and it's good, important work. Thank you.
Thanks. And you want a trip to the States, don't you?
Yes, 3M sponsor a trip to an international road safety conference and a trip to the 3M head office in Minneapolis. But because of COVID, we're not quite sure when that's going to happen.
It's all right. Thanks very much. Well done. Yeah, so Kate.
I don't know if we can say, I just wanted to say congratulations, and I think it's super exciting that you're going to go to America and see some transport solutions out of New Zealand. I think that that's just fantastic. I think that that we have a long way to go with looking at how we support active transport and modal shift, and really value how bold you've been, Marg, and that I know that there's often making change can come with some fairly difficult conversations at times, and I really appreciate how much energy you will have put into this project to make it work for all the residents in the street and other people too. So well done. Yeah.
Matt.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great news. Well done, everyone. I also want to acknowledge the members of the public who came out in support of the trial and the project. You know, people love to give council a hard time. Every now and then we might deserve it, but it takes a bit of courage to actually speak out in support of something that council's doing that not everyone instantly falls in love with. And so particularly when you're doing it in your street and there are people in your street being vocal in terms of their objections to it. So I think that helped. And so if any of those people are watching, which I doubt they will be, I really think we should acknowledge their contribution to this project. And may we have many more of them, because it feels like we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. Thanks very much. It is a journey, and it is, the words are difficult. And I'd have to acknowledge the Marg and the team, the relationships that they've built up, because this is done on relationships,
Yeah.
Particularly with the community and the schools and the kindy and others throughout that. And the relationship we have with Waka Kotahi is absolutely critical, because I think that we've delivered, that's put us in a good spot. And that hasn't always been the case with other projects around the country that have faltered and failed. So well done to Marg and your team. Really appreciate it. Well done. Rightio. Next is the infrastructure quarterly report. I'd like to invite Ms. Parfitt, Ms. Plum, and Mr. Light. As usual, Lois, we'll take the report as read, but this is an opportunity for you to perhaps highlight the things that we need to help us with what we need to know, and opportunity for you to tell a good story.
Thank you, through the chair. Excuse my voice, I've had a couple of days off work, but had clear instructions, story must be written, and I need to be here this morning, and I'm all good. So Q3, this is a report that you have in front of you today. It continued as a positive few months for the infrastructure team as a whole. We were still issuing construction contracts through that period, and works have been all started on site for those projects as well. A number of projects were completed through the quarter, including the Gracefield Sewer Diversion Project, which was actually completed 12 months earlier than planned, and that was to help meet community and the developers' needs as well. So we were absolutely thrilled to be able to bring that forward and get that work completed. We received approval to extend timeframes for the Provisional Growth Fund projects, enabling the projects to maximise the funding opportunities. And the couple of projects that are left are not necessarily infrastructure projects, but we are reporting on them through this committee. The 3 water reform works all commenced, and the Awatea Pump Station tender process got underway through the quarter. A variety of road safety activities occurred during the quarter, including the very popular COPs with cakes, and as we've just been seeing, acknowledging the innovative streets. Risks remain front of mind for the team on our projects, and we are noting we're seeing continual impacts from COVID in the supply chain with delays and additional costs. That's particularly around anything that's needing to come in from overseas, just with delays in actual delivery, but also the pipeline in New Zealand. There's a lot of infrastructure work going on, and there's delays. When we used to be able to get pipes within a couple of weeks, it's taking 6 to 12 weeks nowadays to get the order and get those pipes delivered, even though they're manufactured in New Zealand. We also note there's some changes and cost increases coming up with the temporary traffic management activities, and there's a section in your report on that. Local contractors are working hard to ensure there's minimal disruption to any of our projects. We will have some carry forwards, which we've identified in the report. There's just a few projects that are going to sneak into the next financial year, but they're all well underway. But we're tracking well, and we'll have a record spend this year, which equates to more completed projects supporting our community. So we're very pleased with the third quarter. Any questions?
Councillor Edgar, I think you circulated a couple.
Yes, I present my questions through. Do you want me to repeat them all, or do you want to just go for it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we can hear the question, then the answer.
Okay. 6.3.3 is the Carway Street project proposed to be on target by year end?
Through the chair, yes.
Lovely. 6.4.3. Can you just explain how the LDLs are behind, local disposal levies are behind budget?
Through the chair, so that's an accounting issue. It's linked to moving budget from one GL to another, and it's a timing issue. So things are okay.
Excellent, thank you. 6.5.2. Does this comment relate to the NRSBU or other wastewater assets, or both?
Just Nelson City wastewater assets, excludes NRSBU.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you. 8.2.1, is this at the landfill?
Through the chair, yes it is.
Excellent. 12.12. Just I noted a lot of these groups were younger. Do we do anything specifically with older adults? I noted at the Positive Aging Expo that Plunkett had this amazing like blind spot display. Do we do anything focusing on older adults?
Through the chair, yes, we do. It's not specific to the third quarter, but it's on an ongoing basis. We have a number of contracts. Well, we have a contract with Age Concern, who on council behalf deliver the staying safe driving courses for older drivers, the retiring from driving courses, and the car fit courses. And we also offer one-to-one mobility scooter training on a demand basis.
Sorry, just writing this down. Excellent, thank you very much. I will just say the Plunket display one was amazing. They had like cardboard cutouts of two people, like a little child, and you sat in the car and you could see that actually they were all totally in your blind spots and how easy it is to miss someone in those blind spots. It was a really, eye-opening display.
So through the chair, just for your information, really, that kit was purchased by Nelson City Council and gifted to Plunket for the exact purpose.
Yay, Nelson City Council, well done. And then page 92, just in relation to the Railway Reserve Princess Drive underpass. So in rainfall events, heavier ones, there's still flooding issues. So is that, a service level that, will be there on an ongoing basis?
Through the chair, yes, for a while we're expecting that to happen. There are 3 sumps in that particular thing, but they get overwhelmed at the moment. But once planting is completed all around there, that will help soak up a lot of that water, and we're expecting the sumps will cope a lot better.
Excellent. Snows Hill, just wanted to say great job. And as a little aside on waste management, I do quite frequently on social media see people asking where clothing recycle bins are. Is that something that, I know we tell people where secondhand shops are, but do we tell them where drop-off points for things are?
Through the chair, no, we don't, but there is a reason. We're focusing on op shops, which is a better reuse of textiles. The clothing bins are bailed, and we don't have good oversight of where that is going. So in terms of overseas export and how it's used. So we're focusing on op shops as the primary area for textile reuse.
Thank you. So it would probably be good to make sure the message goes out, as well as you can buy from here, you can drop off here as well, because some people, from what I've seen, don't seem to realise that. Thank you very much for the answers of those questions.
Thanks. I've got Councillor Courtney, then Councillor Sanson, then Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Lois. Lois, I'm on page 47 of the report there, looking at the 5 and 5.1 in particular. I'd like to just, if you wouldn't mind refreshing my memory in respect to the Portman Stream shared pathway that Nelmac are constructing at the moment. My memory tells me that during the term of the last council, the price for that work was close to $1 million, and I see here it's 645,000. Did we receive any external funding for this project?
Through the chair, there was a redesign of it, which made it slightly cheaper, and we have received funding.
Oh, great. Could you tell me what that funding, who the funding was from?
So through the chair, it is recognised as an active transport link, so it qualified for Waka Kotahi's financial assistance rate of 51%.
51%. And if you'd allow me another question on this, arising out of those answers, will it be fenced? That's the community's asking that.
Through the chair, it certainly has a lot of handrails that are going on both sides, and there is some fencing also.
Both sides? It would only require one side, wouldn't it?
Where fencing is required, I'm not sure which side, but they are building from both sides and doing handrails.
Fine. Can I now move, if I can find them quickly enough? Yes, the transfer station, that's into the black, its operation. That's something we've been striving for some time, hasn't it, to make it a user pay facility? Have we achieved that? Is that a good news item in this report?
Through the chair.
I'm looking at page 54, 6.3.8. And then, yes, that's what I'm, no, I'm not. I'm going down on 6.4.1 and 6.4.2.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, it is a good news story. We bought the operation of the transport station kiosk back in-house. It's staffed now by some personnel from the customer services team. And it would appear that the more consistent pricing at the gate has increased our revenue. That revenue has been reinvested in a refit of the kiosk and some maintenance work that was a little overdue. So at the end of the year, the books will balance, but we will have a tidier, safer transfer station to show for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not so long ago, it seemed seemingly unobtainable. Really, it did. It was a dream, really, but it's been successful, so that's great. Can I go over to waste minimisation? And on page 59, 12.5, I just wonder how representative the 130 participants that are involved in this kitchen waste trial, how representative they are. I mean, we made contact with 302 residents, invited them to participate, and only a third did. So that has a concern for me. And then I have another question relating to that.
So through the chair, we have some confidence in that sample. So the route was selected so that it was representative of a wide variety of socioeconomic areas across the city. Yes, 300 letters did go out and a third uptook the opportunity. Many refused because they already home compost. So the third, even if we get a third citywide only accepting this offer, we will have enough waste generated, enough carbon savings and landfill savings to justify continuing with a citywide project. So we're confident that that is a representative sample.
Thank you so much for that answer. Looking at 59 again, page 59, 12.5, you see, I want this to succeed, as we all do around the table. So, you know, I look at the word upscale to the whole city and look at the savings there. We're very, very mindful of, you know, carbon savings, aren't we? So are we looking at what point do you think 12 months trial? Yes, it runs until February 22. Can we wait that long? I mean, to go up another step?
So through the chair, the citywide rollout is dependent upon external funding through ministry levies. So yes, it will. The trial continuing until February will give us really good, robust data to inform a request for interest for taking it to the next scale. Because it may not be composting. Composting is a fairly sort of generic term for processing kitchen food waste. We'll have a better understanding of what the quantities are, and we'll be able to inform our tender specifications, and that will give people time to gear up for which will line up with when the funding comes in. So going as fast as we can, there is external funding involved, and at this stage, if we go forward, it would be 2023. I think we allow about 18 months to gear up, yes.
Thanks, through the chair. Kia ora, Mike, Lois and David. Hi. So starting on page 61, 12.10.2, just it's talking about phase 2 of stuff to make it safer. And I'm just wondering whether if Vanguard Street kind of connections across, or let's say Victory Park connections across both Vanguard and St Vincent Street to the Albert Street stairs and to the kindergarten are being considered in this. Just mindful of, we've had feedback from the community and a little girl hit there, and I just wondered if that's coming.
Through the chair, the answer is yes and no. So no, it's not part of the Innovative Streets trial. But yes, it is part of the short-term activity that's being addressed through the Nelson Future Access Plan. There are, and our safety pipeline projects with Waka Kotahi. So we have proposals in with them at the moment for raising the Toitoi Street, St Vincent Street intersection up onto a platform or crossing platforms, possibly signalising it. Same with signalising the Vanguard Street, Toitoi Street intersection, raised crossings. If it fits the safety criteria, which Waka Kotahi are currently assessing, and they fund it, then that could happen sooner rather than later. And by that, I mean in that first 3 years of the Nelson Future Access.
Thanks very much. So page 62, 12.12, I just wanted to acknowledge, you know, all the initiatives. That looks great. They're obviously education and awareness initiatives, which I'm assuming are just one strand. And I guess reading them, I kind of thought about, you know, the people I know and the, you know, kids and students and older people who ride around the community. Do you feel that this kind of thing makes a really significant difference to improving safety for pedestrians and cyclists?
Through the chair, so road safety in a safe system is made up of many parts. So safe roads and roadsides are one, safe speeds are another, safe road user behaviour is a pillar, and that's what these projects address. So user behaviour, and yes, this is not all of the road safety coordination work. We have ongoing work with schools and with adults. Yes, user behaviour is important in that, and Waka Kotahi have already indicated that we have ongoing funding as a part of a continuous program to continue that work.
Wonderful, thanks. On page 90, just looking at the Mito Dam upgrades, I was just wondering whether we've done any assessment on if sedimentation is an issue in the dam.
Sorry, through the chair. So I know that every period, I don't know how frequently, but we do analysis. We do a survey, zona survey, and see what the capacity of the dam is. So we do keep a track on that which would link in with sedimentation and how much is falling down to the bottom of the reservoir. So we do that. I can't, off the top of my head, speak to how frequently that is happening, but I know that we do.
And would that be reported through to elected members? Is there a reporting mechanism for that information, or is that something we can request?
It's something you can request. I consider it, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Page 111. So reading about stormwater and flood protection reporting, really, it just kind of prompted a thought for me. How are we reporting on, say, inundation and sea level rise impacts? The reason that came up was I went for a walk on Tahuna Beach last night, and I've noticed there's a lot of erosion, and there's, you know, pieces of asphalt. I think Councillor Courtney might have spoken to that some weeks ago, but there is obviously roading material and other hard materials, posts and that kind of thing that have ended up on the beach. And I just wondered, how are we going to be reporting on those things, given that it is likely to be an increasing issue in the future, and we may need to be removing roading infrastructure or other infrastructure? Would it be reported through here, or is there another mechanism?
Through the chair, perhaps I'll answer that. So if we look specifically at the beach, that would fall under the responsibility of parks. And perhaps after this meeting, I will raise this with my colleague, Mr. Andrew White, in terms of how they intend to report that in their in future quarterly reports. But specifically the beach, it does not fall under infrastructure, it falls under community services.
So thanks, but I'm just wondering, like, because infrastructure deals with roading and other kinds of infrastructure, pipes and that kind of thing, and we're already seeing some impact on those from see inundation and that kind of thing. Would it not be relevant that it's also reported through here, because it's covering stormwater, flooding, flood protection? It would seem to me that that's a really key part of our reporting that should be included in infrastructure.
So actually going back, because I seem to recall reading about damage to the car park from the blind channel erosion, and in the Parks and Facilities quarterly reports in the past. In terms of when we do suffer flood damage or erosion damage, we do specifically report on it, but it's certainly not to the extent that we would be wanting to commit to that quarterly, because most of the time there would be nothing to say. But when we do suffer damage, if it's a major event, there are specific reports go to committees about what's happening, And if it's lesser, then it gets covered in the quarterly reports. I expect as we get further into this adaptive management pathway approach, we'll be talking more with the community and the council about how we measure and respond. But the system we have at the moment, I think, is adequate for the situation, Warren.
Thanks very much, Pat. I respectfully, when I'm looking at the performance measures here, it's got a number of measures reporting on stormwater and a number of measures reporting on flood protection. Every quarter we get that. Why would we not also consider having the same measures for inundation impacts? And I'm not saying historically, I think just looking to the future, it just seemed to me like there was a gap here for future reporting. It's not a criticism, it's just is it something we can consider or should be considering?
So if you're referring to the KPIs at the back, those are the ones set as part of the long-term plan process that fed up through the activity management plans and are part of the LTP that's going to be adopted in a couple of weeks' time. So we're almost at the end of that process for this three-year cycle. I don't, David, can you add in anything to that?
So through the chair, so these KPIs are specific to river flooding, and currently the flood protection activity is for rivers only. We do recognise that coastal inundation and coastal erosion is something that needs to be considered. So we've allowed for, in our current LTP, the one that's just about to go out, some costs associated with that. But that whole activity, basically new activity, is going to be created, which will be flood protection. And in the 2024 AMPs and LTPs, that we will be bringing in coastal inundation under that banner. So I think from the 2024 LTPs, there'll be more that activity will be considered now under flood protection, the coastal erosion and coastal inundation.
So the reporting is coming in from 2024 onwards, effectively.
I would anticipate some. Yes, we will be. That activity will be. The AMPs will be developed, including coastal inundation from then on.
And we probably, that's given that sea level rise is very, very slow, that's probably adequate. Do you feel that's adequate?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. And so then the last question I've got is page 112 under the first line item, solid waste. Just reading in the second column, performance measures, it says as of 2019-20, this also excludes materials such as cover materials, special fire disposal, contaminated soils, and water treatment sludge. So I'm just curious as to why those things are excluded from our measurement of waste to landfill.
So through the chair, that's I think this KPI measurement of what's going across the weighbridge at York Valley. We're trying to get a handle on whether there's any reduction in household waste. Our focus areas at the moment are construction, demolition, organic, and of course there's all of that other activity, the waste minimisation activity that's around household waste. These other big ones like water treatment sludge, hail that might come from a developer's site are not something we have as director. It's not going to inform as much how much our waste minimisation work it is. They're big quantities generally, and I think they would skew this KPI. I mean, they're recorded, but they're not part of this KPI.
Okay, but they are recorded, so we know how much contaminated soil is or how much water treatment sludge.
We certainly do keep that data, yes.
Yep. And are we, yeah, I guess, and is are we kind of actively exploring, opportunities to reduce those avenues of waste as well, or not at this time?
I think that might be a business unit, somewhere for the business unit to comment. I mean, certainly waste, well, hail material that's taken off needs to be safely
Disposed
sequestered
of.
somewhere.
Yeah.
But, and the landfill is the place for that. I don't know
think
enough
this-
about
If
wastewater
I
sludge.
remember
Also.
correctly, I think this performance measure is driven by a waste reduction and minimisation plan, which is geared towards, behaviour change of citizens in terms of household waste and industrial waste in terms of, as Mrs. Parfitt said, building construction and other. The hail side is basically disposal of potentially contaminated soil is developed. It's not something it's covered in the waste minimisation plan, but it is accounted for. And the same as the desludge from the wastewater. That's it's not something we do all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just as a governance table, waste minimisation is, one of the things that the organisation's looking at. So it's just a question around, are we measuring those quantities? Are we reporting back on them? So we're obviously not reporting back to council table on them, but that kind of stuff is being monitored. So that was really just trying to understand that. Thanks. Thanks.
Right, Councillor Noonan and then Councillor Laurie.
Thank you. Through the chair. A couple of questions from me, not long, I hope. First of all, looking at the accounts on page 48, 49, and I'm looking at the depreciation amounts, and I guess that's come out of the revaluation. Three Waters is the ones I'm really looking at. Do we make assumptions on those, and they just valued up at more than what we were expecting? Because it certainly reflects in the numbers.
It's probably better if finance would to answer that specific question, if I could be honest. But it all came from the revaluation exercise that happened at the end of the calendar year, I believe. And yes, so it had gone up quite considerably.
So I'm guessing that they valued up at more than what we anticipated.
Yes. So to answer your question, yes.
We did have a provision for the revaluation, and it came in substantially more than we were expecting.
Okay.
And then we peer reviewed those numbers to make sure that they were comfortable, that they were correct, but really made no dent in them. I think that's correct, isn't it, David?
I think there might have been a minor reduction here or there following our peer review, but that was pretty much it.
Okay. Unforeseen, really. Thank you. That's the first thing. The second question is regarding page 59. And these Toswell stormwater. The commentary says that it's been delayed some months due to clashes with services requiring a significant, I've circled significant, redesign. I just wondered why, and if that is the case, have we got sufficient budget set aside for that project now that it's changed scope, really, potentially?
Through the chair, yes, we do. It's just more around the delay and the changes that we had to make is pushing that project out.
Okay, I was a bit worried about the dollars, so that's okay. If you're not, I'm not. Page 63. I just wanted to say at 12.12.5, thank you for the council's support from Rotary, from those of us who are involved in Rotary, and there's a few of us around the table. And that is the Rotary Young Driver Awareness is something that we really enjoy doing and in collaboration. I've got some nods around the table from those that are in Rotary. So thank you very much for the staff involved in that and the time that's put aside for that. So now I'm going to skip down to 13, which are the risks, and at 13.1.1 and 13.1.4 and 14.4, just overall, the risks that are set out there, are our audit risk and finance informed about potential risks? Because certainly with prices of material and things and the delays from overseas, which is what you've addressed, should that be something that's just kept an eye on from our audit risk and finance as well?
So through the chair, I was at the last Audit Risk and Finance Committee, and I think it has been raised as an issue.
Okay.
Yep, that
That's
we are
great.
keeping an eye on, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last one, Mr. Chair, are you going through right to the end of the agenda, or are we doing the blue pages? Okay, I will do it right away. So I've had a little bit of correspondence with Lois. Thank you, Lois, for your patience. Look, when I was looking at some of the items, I could see
And I sort of look at this somewhat from my point of view, but I also look at it from a public point of view. And if I was looking at this and I'm looking at maybe page, there's several, so I'll just maybe pick one. Maybe I'll pick page 78. Or actually page 80. It's not so many dollars involved in this one. So if we look at the bottom right hand corner, which is a project life, and it looks to me like we didn't have any budget. And I know that we do, but it's a thing. So I'm just looking at it from a public point of view. If you're looking at that, it looks like we've got no budget and we've gone off and we've spent all this money. So my query was, can we put something in there that makes some sort of sense? Because I think sometimes the approval comes, you start a project before you set up a page basically, or a number or a job number, and then the money sort of comes at a later time. So from a request from the public, can we have a little bit of commentary of when it actually gets budgeted, so it doesn't look like we're spending money before we actually got it or even approved of it?
Through the chair, yes, a number of projects you will see have $0 at inception. And from a project perspective, that's normally because we are now setting up our projects right at the very start from the activity engineers' thought processes and identifying that they have to write a strategic case. So we start recording the project from that point in time, and there is zero budget at that point in time until they get through that process and the funding is then approved via the planning processes. So there is always budget. We don't actually do projects unless we have budget, but at inception there is frequently no budget. But there isn't a problem for us just to put a little statement in terms of when that budget was approved.
Much appreciated.
Thanks very much. Page 62, item 12.12.4, Go By Bike Day, always a highlight of the Nelson event calendar, and another good event this year. I wasn't aware of much publicity around it in the run up to the actual event, and I know that there's always a lot on, but I got that feedback from quite a few people as well. So I just thought I'd pass that on, and I was wondering whether we work at all with schools in terms of publicising Go By Bike Day, because I think there's a whole lot of people who'd love the event if they knew it was on or got the reminder that it was on when it was on. Any thoughts?
Through the chair, noted. Thank you. We can certainly do that next time round. I don't think we rely on our general media, particularly our social media. We don't specifically invite school students, but they do tend to turn up in their hordes when they know there's free breakfast.
Yeah.
So we don't want to become a victim of our own success. So I
wouldn't mind.
Noted.
Yeah, no, it's really well run event, and the fact that we can put on breakfast for all those people and create zero waste is just sensational. Page 90, next item, which is about the dam and the plans for an aerator. This is something I've sort of followed for a long time, so I'm sorry to be, this sounds at all nitpicky, I don't mean it to be, but Bill Moore was writing features in the Nelson Mail in 2014 about water quality in the Maitai, the river, and the dam. And back in 2014, Cawthron Institute in a report identified that an aerator would be the best thing that you could do to get improvement to the water quality of the river. Why have we still not put an aerator in the dam? It's 2021. It's coming. What's the story behind that delay?
So I can't probably speak to 2014, if that's what you reported on. So at the moment, we are improving we are looking at various options, or they have been looking at options as to how they can aerate the dam, or because we get stratification that happens within it. So they're looking at how can we, and aeration is just one form of doing that. They are looking at other technologies to do that. So it's not just a one solution.
Sure.
We're going through a business case process where you look at what your options are, and those things take time. We don't just run off and just go with one option straight away. So we've just following our project management processes and looking at what those options are, and it's linked in with a resource consent requirement as well, which is what we're working through too.
Okay, through the chair, I mean, this part, I mean, it's a brief summary of what's going on in this report, but it talks about water quality. Is that water quality of the river as well as the water in the dam itself?
So through the chair, this is primarily focused on the dam itself.
Right.
So it's linked in with the water that we also take back. So the water we take from the Mito South branch, we then replace that with water that's currently in the dam as well. So it's also improving that quality too, so that what we discharge back into that river is good quality, which it is. We're able to manipulate the system throughout the year, so that we're always taking the best quality water. But this one is purely focused on the dam itself, which then spills over down the spillway into the down into the Mito.
Sure. If the water is better though, if the water in the dam is better and then that goes into the Mito, can we presume that that would be beneficial to the health of the Mito?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm looking forward to that happening. Page 97, the bike shelters. Feedback I've had from a number of people, and I've experienced myself, and I suspect Councillor Skinner with his, what do you call that bike? Monster bike? The huge wheels. So the channels and the racks are too narrow for some thicker tyres, and so what advice I've given to people who've found themselves in that situation, and my mountain bike tyres, for example, won't struggle to fit in there, is you say, well, you can use the racks at the end, but those are really reserved for cargo bikes, and if people with thick bike tyres are filling up those spaces, there's no room for the cargo bike. So have you had that feedback as well? And have you given any thoughts to how we can accommodate those thicker tyres?
Through the chair, yes, we have had that feedback. And one of the things that the team is doing is looking at widening the channels. You can just literally pry them open and allow bigger tyres. We use the standard size that they have around the country, but I think we just have a lot more mountain bikers in Nelson, so yes, they will be widened.
Oh, great.
Not unfortunately big enough for Councillor Skinner's tyres.
They're very big tyres.
The tree works fine. I enjoy wrapping my arms around the tree with a big hug as I
That's
hold
good.
into it. So it's
Okay, that's good news. Thank you. And then page 107, which is about the Mito pathway, and it's been fantastic to see Nelson get a little bit of a bonus out of the shovel-ready funding with that project. It was shovel-ready funding, wasn't it, that got us that?
Provisional Growth Fund.
Okay, cool. So we've gone from Collingwood Street to Bridge Street, and then of course people go, this is fantastic, and then it gets all narrow when you go from Bridge Street to Hardy Street. Where in the plan do we actually improve things next from Bridge Street to Hardy?
So through the chair, we're working with that community right now. So we're working with particularly the Demet Street sector. You might recall that we've kind of been here before, but we got a bit of pushback. We are now re-engaging with the community, and it's in the plans to construct, I believe, next year. If not next year, the following year. But it's going to happen. It's just we have to get good. We have to take the community with us on this, and design and construct something that is fit for purpose.
So it's interesting because when I think in 2015 we were initially looking at doing the work that we have done now, there was some pushback. This work is now in place, and all the feedback I've received has been overwhelmingly positive. Has that been your experience?
Through the chair, yes, it's got what we've done so far has gone down very well. I think the next section between Bridge Street and Niall Street does have some specific challenges around trees and reallocation of space, and that's what we're working on right now.
All right, thank you very much. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have a couple of questions. Lots of interesting questions asked so far. I guess it's because we have a fairly light agenda. We have time to ask lots of questions around the quarterly report today. So I wanted to pick up on a couple of questions, particularly some questions Councillor Sampson asked around waste minimisation. And I always really enjoy reading what we've been up to. Over the years, I've asked a couple of questions, and I'm just going to ask them again to see where we might have landed. So regarding commercial glass and commercial cardboard, how are we going with ensuring that's diverted from landfill? My understanding was that if it was mixed, it was going up to landfill, and that's been an issue for hospitality. So have we managed to come up with a solution to support the recycling of commercial glass and cardboard?
Through the chair, no, we haven't. The commercial glass, because it's not sorted at source, is going to be crushed. It's not going to Visy in Auckland for with the rest of the stuff that we pick up at curbside. What we pick up at curbside is colour sorted at curbside, and then it can go to the right place. It would require the commercial premises to colour sort for us to be able to do that, because they don't, or they don't have the capacity or the desire to do that. It's a commercial operation. We don't collect glass commercially, nor do we collect fibre, cardboard commercially. So it's not a council provided service. I believe the fibre that is collected commercially would be being recycled, but it's not something that we have oversight of because it's a commercial operation.
So do you think that if the residents of Nelson discovered that all of their wine and beer and glass bottles when they go out for dinner and out to the pub is actually not being recycled, that it's going to landfill, that would be slightly perturbing when we have such a great opportunity to recycle glass in this country? And I guess I'm just really, like, we have just subsidised hospitality to maintain outdoor dining, and I'm really concerned that we're not looking at how we can support hospitality to divert.
I'm not sure that's a fair question to ask of the officers.
Well, I'm just curious what we must have been thinking about a solution. This has been an issue for a number of years. So what can we do? How can we get glass out of landfill?
Well, I think
commercial glass out of landfill.
Well, at the moment it's a commercial operation, and if the bars just choose to put it into a black plastic bag and put it in a skip out the back.
No, they're not doing that. They're putting it into recycle bins. They put it into glass recycle bins, but then the recycle bins end up at landfill. They separate their glass from their rubbish, but then
well, it's still a commercial operation. It's not something that. But that's not fair. That's not a fair question to ask the officers.
Well, we say it's a commercial operation, but we also know that it's a commercial operation which isn't working effectively for our community. We've got all this amazing zero waste initiatives in terms of trying to divert with Waste No More, and we have some incredible zero waste initiatives at our events. Why aren't we supporting our hospitality industry to achieve the same goals on a day-to-day basis? I'm just puzzled.
Can I just ask a question that might help? Maybe what might help is the question, what is the mechanism to address this? Like, that's really what you need to find out, don't you, Kate? Like,
do we have to subsidise curbside recycling of glass like we subsidise residential curbside recycling of glass? How could we solve this issue?
So through the chair, I can only iterate that. Look, we have a solid waste activity management plan, and that solid waste activity management plan does not cover the commercial how we deal with commercial cardboard, paper, or glass. We have a number of initiatives in our solid activity management plan that is being led by particularly Karen Lee, and she's doing some amazing work in terms of trying to figure out how we work with the contractors to get construction material out of our landfill. She's doing amazing work at our events, and she's working under the mandate that's followed in our solid waste activity management plan. We have to be. So we're giving effect to our solid waste activity management plan. I can only reiterate that at this moment in time, we are not looking at initiatives for commercial because we are not dealing with commercial. It's been run by several operators, and I know that cardboard in particular does get collected and that does get recycled. As to glass, we're dealing with the domestic, and then for those that deliver to the recycling to the transfer station, we deal with that. But we have no mandate at this moment, and our solid waste activity management plan does not lead us to dealing with commercial. It's as simple as that. We are doing excellent work, but we also can't do excellent work across the entire range of things.
Okay, but I did raise it a number of years ago, and I've raised it quite a few times. So I'm surprised that we haven't tried to come up with a solution of dealing with commercial glass, which diverts it from landfill.
So through the chair, I can just say we do accept commercial quantities at the transfer station because the hospitality have restaurant or bar have sorted it and can bring it to the transfer station and put it through there free of charge. So we do accept that in commercial quantities. They need to be prepared to do the sorting.
Okay, so maybe we could do some promotion around that then. Maybe that's an option. We could do some promotion around encouraging our hospitality to sort and take it to the transfer stations themselves. I just feel like that's an option. That seems to be great. I'm glad we had that conversation. My second question is a question Judine asked around recycling of clothing. There's been a lot of Facebook posts recently around the fact that some secondhand operators are just putting clothing straight into skips, and they're not. So high quality clothing is going straight to landfill as well. Have we checked in with our secondhand sort of shops and our providers that they are ensuring that they stockpile if they're at capacity, and how we can support them to stockpile if they need that support? Are you aware of that, Marg?
No, I wasn't aware of that. And through the chair, we'll follow up with that. I know that Karen is working very closely with the op shops and the secondhand clothing shops. So that's something we can follow up.
Okay, great. My third question is around waste minimisation. Lots of waste minimisation questions. In terms of the compost trial, and the upscaling of that, so that follows on from Councillor Courtney's question. You mentioned that composting was a generic word, whereas it was quite an intentional word in the long-term plan in terms of the co-benefits of turning food waste into compost, so you can then grow food in it again, so completing that circular economy. So I just wanted to check that when you're moving through that thinking, that you'll align it with the Good Food Cities thinking in terms of ensuring that food waste is diverted from landfill, but it's also turned into a product which grows food in it again.
Through the chair, we will be mindful of that, and when we have a really robust understanding of what the quantities are and what the most appropriate and cost-effective way of processing that is, that's what will inform our tender. But okay. I do take your point that you would prefer to see it composted, but I can't give you an absolute assurance that that will happen right now. It will depend on the outcome of the trial, and we will be bringing, no doubt, a tender back to you.
So that will come back to it?
I'm sure it will come back.
Okay, great. Third question, if you could please, on page 57 of the agenda, maybe just outline briefly the climate change emission reduction strategy for the water program and the wastewater program. It says that they both commenced, so.
So through the chair, can you repeat your exact question?
Page 57,
yes.
Under the water program, it says there's a climate change emission reduction strategy of 30,000, and that's commenced.
Yes.
And under the wastewater, there's a climate change wastewater network heat mapping for 30,000 and a climate change emission reduction strategy of 175,000. And I'm just curious what commenced means and what those pieces of work will entail.
So the commenced means that the projects have started and we're starting to, they're progressing. So that's what commenced means. From what those projects actually means to the wastewater network heat mapping, that looks at trying to understand whether we can use the residual heat within our wastewater system to produce some energy to potentially power buildings, and okay. So it's looking at those potential options there. The wastewater emissions reduction strategy, we're predominantly looking at what our emissions are from the Nelson wastewater treatment plant. Okay. So that's what's happening this year and probably next year with that money. And then in the future, we'll be looking at what we can reduce from our energy audits on the equipment that we have at our wastewater treatment plant or at our pump stations. And so can we reduce our energy consumption costs, or energy consumption at those assets? Similarly, for the water side, this financial year, we're focusing on energy reductions potentially from the water treatment plant and seeing are there any ways we can improve our efficiencies there. And then next year, we'll hopefully be looking at for the wider network of the water network and reducing our energy consumptions there.
Okay, great, thank you. Will that work be reflected in the work that Danielle is doing in terms of our climate change action plan? So will you pick up and make sure that that connects in?
So through the chair, the emissions reduction action plan, I understand council-wide one, this is one small part of that piece.
Yeah.
So yes, it will.
Great, thank you. And I have one last question, but I just need to remember what it was. Wastewater treatment. Oh, just going back to Councillor Sanson asked some questions around sea level rise and coastal inundation. And I'm presuming that will also be reflected in our climate change action plan, which is also going to look at adaptation as well. So it might be worth thinking about how that can connect into there. But also the importance of understanding, like my understanding of Blind Channel is that's not due to sea level rise or climate change, that's due to Blind Channel deciding to move. So we need to really tell the story around when rivers or coastal environments are moving due to just that natural variation. So that's is that correct? That's my understanding of Blind Channel, is it will ebb and flow and move.
It's more to do with the direction of travel of silt and gravels in Tasman Bay. That's just the direction of travel, and it's pushing the silt and sands into the Blind Channel and pushes the Blind Channel into Hurunui Beach. And until that changes, we're dealing with a very powerful force that has nothing to do with climate change.
Okay, great. Thank you. I thought that was the case.
Not the quarterly report for all the questions that we can. It's been moved by Councillor Noonan. Anyone to second? Thanks, Councillor Neil Stevens. I don't think we need any debate. We just receive it. Oh, well.
I'll do some. It's just a little treat to say thank you so much. I think that graph that shows the projected final spend of the year is a great story to tell of how hard the entire team has worked, and acknowledging Lois, David and Marg, and as well as Alec for and the whole team for how hard they've worked this year and how hard I know they're going to work in the coming year as well. Hopefully they will get a break at some point. Oh, no. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'll endorse Councillor Neil Stevens is that we set our stretch goal was close to $40 million capital expenditure spend, and we're pretty much on target to achieve that. So it is a good news story. You'll see there that there was 40 projects that were reported on. They're the more complex, the more expensive, the larger ones. There are a lot of little projects underneath that. And the fact that you see most of them are, almost all of them are green in terms of scope, in terms of time, and in terms of budget, is an acknowledgement to the professionalism and the commitment of the officers and our contractors. So thank you very much. I think it was an excellent report. It was thoroughly enjoyable to read. It was just good news, one page after the other. So well done to everyone. So thanks very much for that. The recommendation is that we receive the quarter report. Those in favour will say aye. Against? Carried. Do we have any other business? No, I think we'll conclude with that. Just a reminder that in terms of the submissions, in terms of the water review, water supply bylaw and the wastewater bylaw, if you have any questions, could you please email them to Mr. Levertis so that can be included in the deliberations, which we dealt with at our next meeting or maybe the meeting after that, depending on what comes up. But with that, so bring the meeting to a close. We'll close with karakia. Tua, ki ronga, tua ki raro, tua te roto. tuia ka waro, tua te hei tangatanga, ka ronga te po, ka ronga te ao, hui e, tarangi. Thanks so much, we're done.